wonder would it do me any good? But until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess just have to walk around my neighborhood. And I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. But bad desire's all I've ever had. I wanna take a ride up in the sky, watch the aeroplanes just pass me by. I wanna see a Learjet liner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. And I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. My bad desire's all I've ever had.
All right. First off, thank you for inviting me, and thank y'all for being here. I was just saying to some of the people who were here earlier, normally it might cause me great anxiety. However, knowing the people here and the way that y'all love and support me, and the way that I care about all of you, has made this very easy, and I appreciate that. It means a lot to me that I feel this comfortable with a group of people, and I wanted to thank y'all, and we'll get to it. My name is Tommy, and I want to. Got a lot of years to cover, and I would like to paint a picture for you a little bit about where I come from and the family I come from. And because I was born in 1965, I'm in the southern part of Louisiana. And to be born in 1965, a lot of the things that I'll be talking about were, of course, all pre-internet. Things were very different back then. The way my parents parented is a little outmoded, in good ways and bad ways. So while I'm telling you my story, I'd like for y'all to keep in mind that, this was a different period, different era. We're talking about my parents probably being about the age of your grandparents. Now, I'm not saying they were that age when I was born. My mother and father were young when they had me. I'm the only son. I'm the youngest child. I only have one older sister, who is only about 16 months older than me, but a world of difference in personality type. My mother and father were very different. My father was a good man. He was a stoic man, and not in a bad sense. That's just the way he was. He was not a emotional person. He's very calm, very collected, very quiet. And I learned early that if I wanted his attention, the only way that I got his attention was by playing sports mostly. He had no interest in my academic affairs. He had no interest in my social affairs. Very hands-off parenting is what I came from. Not not the least bit of helicopter parents. Um, my mother suffered from a great deal of depression and anxiety. She became a drug addict and addicted to drugs that she fought with until she killed herself in later life. So they were good people. They were wonderful people. I've dealt with a lot of resentments because as a child, growing up where I did, everything to me was very black and white. I very, when I looked at my mother and father, I judged them very black and white. You were either good or bad. And as a child, I had absolutely no clue as to what they were going through. Um, I was hard on them, but I don't want you to think that anything I say tonight that I still hold any grudges or any resentments to my parents. As I've grown older and as I've become a parent myself, uh, I've gained a lot of insight into what they were going through. They were very young. I remember, I have memories of my parents at the age of 21 when they were 21. So I was old enough to remember them uh, at a very, very young age. So I grew up with them. So you add the combination of extremely young parents, and then you add in my mother's drug addiction. Uh, it did not bode well for them or for me. Um, but like I said, I love them very much. I miss them very much. But I did for years have resentments and a lot of pain uh, towards my parents and because of my parents. I was a somewhat difficult child in the sense that of the very few stories that I have from my father about me, my father's the type of man, if I asked him a question, he just couldn't remember. I could ask him, Dad, what was this? What was that? Nah, I don't remember. He didn't have time to talk about feelings. He didn't have time to talk about memories, you know. And if he did talk about memories, they were generally, rose-colored glasses type memories. But I was told by my father that in these words, Tommy, I knew when you were little, which meant I was, I don't have a memory of this. I was about, I guess, 2 or 3. He said, I told you to pick up your toys in the living room. It was time to go to bed. And I said, no, didn't want to. So I spanked you. And I told you to pick up your toys. And he said, I looked at him and I said, no, I don't want to. So he spanked me again, he said, a little bit harder. Me again, Tommy, pick up your toys. Bed. I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to pick up my toys. And he hit me a little harder. He spanked me a little harder. He said at that point, I realized that I had stop. Because if I spanked you any harder, I was going to hurt you. That's when I knew that you were different. So I guess I kind of marched to my own drummer from day one. I was close to my grandparents. I was close to some of my great grandparents. Teachers loved me. I believe that if I were asked, you may have if you've ever met a child that was, people go, you know, that child, that small child is a old soul. I think that's the impression that I had of myself and other people had of me. I could be easily self-contained. I did not generally care for other children because, one, I did not find them intellectually stimulating in the least bit, and I found them to be much too unpredictable. Now, I'm talking all throughout my childhood. I did not feel comfortable with it. I felt comfortable with adults. The older, the better. My mother would go shopping to. I remember there was a certain clothing store that she would go to. That in the back room was a room full of ladies, seamstresses, ladies in the back, all working on their sewing machines. And I was not the kind of child to run around and make noise and play. I went straight to this back door, and I would stand at that door, and I would converse with these ladies. That was fun for me. They were nice ladies. I felt comfortable around them. And I would go and talk to them because to me, that was safe. That was predictable, if you will. Children, on the other hand, were children. And I did not have the interests of spending time with them. I certainly did not like to spend time with groups of children. I could tolerate one child, best friend, but I did not want all the neighborhood kids around me. You know, my mother used to tell me as a child, as I grew up in a very small town in Louisiana, talking about the very early 70s, which was like the 50s. And my mother would tell me things like, be careful because some children will only want to play with you because of your toys. And all the toys. Always had all the toys. I always grew up with go-karts. And this was before you could go to the store and buy them. My grandfather would have to have them made. I had 3 go-karts. I had 3 motorcycles. And I had all the freedom in the world. Take that motorcycle. I'd take a loaded shotgun at the age of 7, 8, 9 years old. And my family has a farm that's several thousand acres. And I would spend the day riding my mini bikes, my motorcycles, all over that farm with a loaded gun. And I'd I could just spend the day by myself. It didn't matter. Or I could spend the day on the sofa reading a book. It didn't matter because I found that my feelings would get extremely hurt if certain things were told. I did not handle criticism well. I did not handle disappointment. When someone criticized me or someone said something to me that was hurtful, or I felt was hurtful, I would feel literally like there was a hole in my midsection. It would just destroy me. And as I got a little bit older and I was able to start hunting and fishing and playing sports, I knew that that was the only way that I'd get my father's attention. At the same time, as I'm growing up and learning these things, I'm also learning that my mother was emotionally troubled. I remember being with her in the middle of the day and she would just sit in a chair and cry. And I'd crawl up in her lap and try to make her stop crying and try to find out why. I also knew that to go anywhere with my mother, I was not safe because, in my opinion, as a child, she would overreact to everything. She could not handle any kind of tension. She could not handle any type of situation that required her to take charge. She was a wounded, troubled woman who was very smart, and could have accomplished so many more things in her life if she had been raised in a different generation. To her, unfortunately, now this concerned her personally, not for the world, but for her. She thought that her worth was based on her looks. And as she aged, as she grew older, it was very hard for her. She was a sweet, sweet person, but she was, I guess, brutally hard on herself and did not have confidence that she should have had. Because, like I said, she was a very intelligent lady. She was a very empathetic lady to other people's troubles. Now, the most important thing that I had to learn in my home was being polite and manners. I said yes, sir, and no, sir to my father. I said yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am to my mother. I said yes, sir, and no, sir, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am to any person who was older than me. That's the way I was raised. I was very strict. So I was a very polite, well-mannered. Manners in my family were the mark of being well raised, of being the upper crust, if you will, of where I live. A lot was put on me. And you worked hard and you were very well managed. I did not have a problem with that. I always respected my elders. That unfortunately brought to pass a point where I've shared this with Dopey Nation before, not shared it with anyone else. I was molested. Not once, not twice, but three different at various stages of my adolescence, men and women molested me. Now, I'm not going to go into that, but it happened. But the type of young man that I became, I was very sensitive, very, very sensitive. I loved my mother very, very much. I feel that connection with my father and did not develop that until much later in life. But I was very close to my mother and very close to some of my grandparents and great grandparents. To give you an idea of what type of young boy I became, I I excelled in sports. I excelled in school. I was an avid reader, loved books. I loved knowledge. I was very curious. I did not love sports, but I had to do them in order to get my father's approval. And yet, still, I was very good at it because my father would spend any amount of time with me if I was doing what he enjoyed doing. So he would get home from work. If I wanted to shoot basketball, we would shoot basketball until it was too dark to shoot. Baseball, football, it didn't matter. But it had to be what he enjoyed. It wasn't what I enjoyed. Even though I excelled at sports and I played them all, I did not have the killer instinct. I was not competitive in the sense that I enjoyed having other people lose to me. I got nothing from them. But I did well, and I played the game the way it was supposed to be played. I had a good coach in my father, but I respected other people. But it wasn't the end all be all for me. But I did have to be good, and I did not, could not, should not embarrass my father. I started liking girls at a young age. I I can remember. I'll give you a couple of snapshots of what I'm trying to do with this early part of my life is give you an idea of what I was like and what it was like where I lived, so that we can compare it to what I became. But these are my formative years, and these are important stories to me because I think they say a lot about who I was, how I was, and what type of person I was growing up to be. The first little girl that I had a crush on, first grade, second grade, third grade, every holiday, Valentine's Day, uh, Christmas, I always bring an extra gift to school just for her. I was just smitten with her. So for 3 years, she would get an extra gift on every holiday when we'd have a little school party. I would go and get her a little something, give it to her. Third grade, she came to school with a gift for me. Remember where I was standing? Remember it like it was yesterday. There were children standing around us. She handed me a gift, and I felt good. She finally, after 3 years, was bringing me a little something. She handed it to me. I said, thank you. She turned to her friends and said, my mother made me get it. I was heartbroken. I heard her say that, and I swore I'd never like her again. The next little girl that I liked, a little bit older, a couple years later, maybe fifth grade or whatever, went to we'd have these little sock hops, little dances, walked in. Her name was Becky. I walked in that little sock hop, and Becky was sitting there with Scooter. That's right, Scooter. They were holding hands. And I had no clue that was coming. I think I may have even kissed Becky before. But she was the girl I liked. She was holding hands with another boy. And I walked out of that sock hop. I walked the 8 or 9 or 10 blocks back home, crying uncontrollable, inconsolable. I was devastated. Now, to me, I kind of get a chuckle about it, but to go back and to tell you this, it is not something that I think that should have happened. I should not have been so devastated that Becky was holding hands with Scooter. But I was. And I went home and I cried. Cried and I cried. And my father actually tried to console me. But I don't know if there was anything he could have. So I was very sensitive. I was my heart was very tender. I was a tender child. Then the next little girlfriend I had, this one's kind of sad, but she became ill. But I once, and I want you ladies to listen closely. How would you feel if a boy of the age of 10 or so rode his bicycle for 8 miles just to kiss you? And that's what I did. I rode my bicycle for 8 miles just to get a kiss. That's how much it meant to me. She became ill. They couldn't figure out what it was, and passed away. That was the first funeral I ever went. It hurt. Life hurt me. It was painful. A lot of things about it were painful. The only time that I seemed to get some sort of uh, release or some sort of safety from life and from the anxiety was when I would be isolated, when I would just be by myself. That's when I felt the most. And as I think I've said enough about my family. There was a thing that happened around this time, and I'm just gonna kind of just go over it, but it was very rough. Around this time, uh, my mother developed a drug problem had become so bad that they were sending her to rehab. Got to remember, this was the mid 70s. Rehab was a fairly new thing, especially in South Louisiana. And in doing so, I was exposed to a lot of drama between my mother and father that I did not need to be exposed to. And the most important one was we found out, my sister and I found out that my father had been cheating on my mother with her best friend. And my father's tennis partner, it was his wife. And at that point, all things were off. I saw what it did to my mother. It devastated my mother. And if you devastate my mother, then you're on my shit list. My father he was on my shit. Hated him. I knew absolutely nothing about marriage. I knew nothing about the problems of being married, growing older. But I thought I did. And I knew that my father was evil because he made that mistake. And at that point, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was devastated. I had been cheated on. I had been lied to. I had been humiliated. And then you add on top of it, being that I was closer to my mother, seeing her losing control of her life with her problems. But I felt betrayed. And I didn't do well. When I was 15, I met a girl, and she was the love of my life. I didn't know it at the time. I was her first. And I thought I was going to go into this in greater detail, but I'm not. Needless to say, there was a pregnancy that did not come to term, and when all this is over, if anyone wants to hear about it, but this relationship and the ending of it 1 year later, at the age of 16, was where the trajectory of my life started coasting down. Because at that point, I had been hurt so severely that I felt justified doing, saying anything I wanted to in order to protect myself. And as the years went by, that only seemed to get worse and worse. My behavior. At that point is when my drug use kicked off. I'm also going to put in there one other thing that I used and that was sex. So I had sex, I had drugs, and I had alcohol to ease my pain. And I wanted that connection with someone else that I could risk going through that pain again. I wasn't going to do it. I could get that little touch of intimacy. I could get the physical contact. I could get a small connection in 1 or 2 or 3 nights with a girl. But I could not let her into my life. Could not let anyone into my life. When I didn't have that, I would drink. When I didn't, or the drugs were available. But it became my, just like alcohol, it was my escape. It was my escape, and it was the only affection that I would allow myself. It was the only connection that I would allow myself, was a brief connection. You gotta remember, this is not in the age of Tinder, where you can get your hookups. Yeah, this is old school. This is old school in the sense that you had to be able to talk, you had to be able to listen, you had to be able to present yourself in person, and it consumed me because I was going to get this person in bed. I was going to get this girl or woman in bed because it was the only fleeting sensation I had of love, intimacy, and the possibility of healing. Because at that time, I thought there was going to be that one magic person, that one magic girl, that one magic woman that was going to be able to heal me of all that emptiness. If I didn't get it in the 2 or 3 nights, moved on to the next one. And that is a empty existence. That big hole that I had inside. I mean, just a big, giant, hollow hole. I wasn't getting anything. I wasn't getting any love. I wasn't getting any true connection. Wasn't getting it from my family. My family was the type of family that their way of manipulating you was financial. So basically what happened, I remember a couple of things. Like, I told my parents, you know what, I think I'm going to stay home, go to college nearby. And they just went, whoa, 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 whoa. I think they were ready for me to leave, because at that point I was presented with, tell you what, we'll make a deal with you. It was all deals. My family wheeled and dealed. If you go off to college, away from home, we'll make sure you never have to live in a dormitory. We'll pay for your apartment. I never lived in a dormitory. Just went straight into my own apartment. When they found out or heard things that they didn't like the people I was hanging around, my my mother said, "Hey, I want you to join a fraternity. I'll pay your dues." Because she didn't care for the types of people I was hanging around. She thought I needed to be in a fraternity. But it was all taken care of. And that's what they would do around things to get you to do what they wanted you to do. They would make it give you a financial incentive to not do what you wanted to do, but to do what they want you to do. When you're young, you fall for it, you know. But at that point, it was all about the drinking. It was all about the drinking. It was all about the screwing. And if anyone here is old enough, and you may want to go back and Google it, and I'll start with the dopey stories pretty much here. I was dating a girl, 1988. I don't know if some of you may remember, there was a gentleman, how I got Tommy Savage got wrapped up in the 1988 United States presidential campaign. There was a gentleman running for president. His name was Gary Hart. Gary Hart looked like he was going to be one of two people running for president in 1988. He was ahead of everybody. And he made a comment to the press that if they thought they could catch him cheating on his wife, that they should try and catch him. Well, it happens that I'm hanging out on a boat. I had a girlfriend. Her father had a boat. All of a sudden, we saw tons of fucking camera people. All the news organizations came. He got caught cheating on that boat. And I was there. I wasn't there when he was cheating, but I was hanging out. And yes, Steve, it's called monkey business. But the man who owned it, his daughter was my girlfriend. And we were drinking and partying, and it was that business. So that was one of those things where in college I started to have adventures. I started to do things. I started to go places. I got into the book business. Back then, the book business was totally different. And what I could do was I could travel anywhere I wanted in the United States. I could go, okay, let's use this as an example. San Francisco, the Bay Area, you got a lot of bookstores. So I would go out there. I would buy books about Louisiana, and I would come back to Louisiana. I could sell them for more money. I could find books about California or San Francisco and Louisiana. I could go back to California and sell them there for more money. And that allowed me to start going all over the United States. I dropped out of college. I was drinking, I was screwing, and I was getting to travel. And I was empty. And I was soulless. But I was doing all the things that I thought that I could do or should do in order to bring that, to close that hole. Hey, look, I'm young, I'm not married, you know, I'm living life. I'm living life. I'm hanging out on monkey business, and I'm, you know, going all over the country. And I got a job, my one job that I had as an adult, that did not have to do with books. And this job sent me once again across the United States. I worked for, they would send me to nonprofit businesses, or such as Dallas Symphony. I would go to Dallas Symphony. I'd work in marketing and development. So I would go for 6, 8, 10 months to Dallas. I'd work for the Dallas Symphony. 6, 8 months, I'd go to St. Louis Symphony. 6, 8 months, I'd go to the Shakespeare Festival. These types of arts, nonprofit arts organization, help them in their marketing and development. And that just put me all over the United States too. And all that did was put more money in my pocket, or more drugs, more party drugs, more alcohol, more vacations, more travel. And then the game was on. The game was on. I feel like I'm boring you with too many details at this point. So let me jump ahead a little bit. Once again, if I'm not, when I'm finished, if there's an error or something that you want to know more about, just ask and I'll do it. But I got married at this time, and that was a complete fiasco. It was a sad fiasco. It because I wasn't even remotely prepared to give my heart. I was still terrified. I married this girl, and I was terrified of her. I was terrified of her, my feelings towards her. And it was the first time I ever had a full-blown anxiety attack. Scared the shit out of me. And I had that attack because we had just gotten married and she was going away for a 3-day weekend. And I was so terrified of her being away from me for 3 days that I thought I was going to die. It was an empty experience, but it was a terrifying experience. So it didn't last but a year. And at that point, I was ready to die. I had had enough. In fact, she asked for a divorce on the same day that I got fired. And I licked my wounds for a couple of months, and I tried to kill myself. And I said, okay, now it's time. Let's do this. So I'm going to South America. I'll find somebody that'll kill me down there. Let's get this done. Let's get this over with. And I went down to South America, didn't know anybody, didn't know the language, got off the plane, and my purpose down there was literally to get myself killed. So I started behaving in a way that was much more dangerous than just driving drunk. We get in fights a lot. I would get violent. I would sometimes couldn't sleep at night, couldn't get to sleep. I would walk out of my hotel room and I would walk around the city at 3 o'clock in the morning. Somebody would. By myself. I would just walk the streets in the middle of the night. Major city, I knew where the good sections were and where the bad sections were. I walk around looking for somebody to do me a favor. I started doing more coke, started drinking a lot more, and started fucking a lot. And it was all pitiful under the guise of having a good time. But it was pitiful. I was angry. I was violent. I was, I used to say this to my friends, you know what? Tonight, we can either fuck or fight. Didn't matter to me. I was good with either one or both. And, the next thing you know, I'm involved with another military coup where I get locked in the presidential palace doing cocaine with the cronies of the president who's getting thrown out of the country. We had thousands of people rioting in the streets. The next thing you know, I'm partying with contestants of Miss Universe. That was fun. I mean, I at this point, I had a couple of businesses, a couple of bookstores. They had the Miss Universe contest in this hotel that I had a bookstore in. I was selling books, rare books, to Colombian drug lords to launder their money. I was working with people in the Ecuadorian government to help track and find insurgents, people who were causing political problems in Ecuador. I was on boat trips down the Amazon River doing intelligence gathering for the Ecuadorian military because they needed to know how many Peruvian military installations they had between Ecuador and Iquitos, Peru, in a isolated part of the Amazon. Which, if I were caught doing that, they could kill me for spying. And I was fucking. Did I say that? To bring that up, a lot of empty sex. 1, 2, 3 at a time. It didn't matter to me. Got involved with a Russian lady, Ludmilla. Ludmilla was helping run this wasn't many years after the fall of the Soviet Union. They had an excess supply of AK-47s, and they wanted to get those sold in Latin American countries. So there were contacts in each major city throughout Latin America. And this group of Russians would come through. They would sell AK-47s, which are very hard to get in certain countries. You'd make the deal. Then about a week later, another group of Russians, 3 or 4 would come up, would show up, and they'd have parts. But not the complete weapon. And then a few weeks or a couple of weeks or a week later, 10 days, another group would come through with more parts. And that's how they were bringing in weapons into Ecuador. I was fucking Ludmilla, who was heading up their little meetup place in the country I was in. She looked exactly like Lauren Hutton. Many of you remember that actress. Even had the gap in her front teeth like Lauren Hutton. And those are some of the things, Ludmilla. The time I met Jimmy Buffett, but I didn't know I met Jimmy Buffett until, as I was talking to him, somebody came and asked for his autograph. So I looked over his shoulder and found out I was talking to Jimmy Buffett. I didn't recognize him, little guy. But my life changed. I unexpectedly became a father at 35. And I knew that I couldn't cheat on my children. That's when I first started turning my life around. I knew that I couldn't chase women and be a good father. I knew I couldn't drink and do drugs if I wanted to be a good father. And that would actually go back to the story I kind of left out about the pregnancy and the first girlfriend, because it affected me that what, the abortion had affected me. So I started to turn my life around at that point. But yet I still had a hankering for alcohol and, still had a taste for certain drugs. But I could keep it on the down low. I kept picking my pants. Really found fulfillment in parenting. Found love, the most important thing. And that hole got filled that was inside of me, that emptiness. And my children taught me taught me how to love again, how to give myself, and their love was so pure and innocent and unthreatening to me that I was able to just soak it up. Unfortunately, it didn't work out with their mother. The marriage ended. I had left. That was the hardest thing, to leave my kids, even though they were older and in college, getting to near college and in college. And that's when I bottomed out. When I lost my kids, I was not living with them. I went over the edge. I became suicidal again. My addiction went out of control. And a little over 3 years ago, I got my shit together and went through rehab for the third time. And now I'm here in Dopey Nation with 3 years of clean and sober, and very happy and very knowledgeable, much more knowledgeable about myself. And I just keep working on myself every day. My kids are wonderful. My kids are smart. My kids are beautiful. They have wonderful lives that they're leading. And I have nothing but time to work on myself, try and make myself a better person. And I've only begun to achieve that when I had a clear head. It came with my complete abstinence from drugs and alcohol. I feel more complete. I feel happier with myself. I have a relationship with myself. And I'm very, very appreciative to all of you who have been here listening to this and been there for me, because y'all are a major part of my continuing sobriety. Y'all are a major part of my self-discovery. You're a major part in every day of my life, because I care about y'all. I love y'all. I need y'all. And I feel like, I hope that sometimes I have something that can benefit any of you from time to time. Thank y'all for letting me share.
I wanna take a walk around the world. I wonder if it do me any good. Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just walk around my neighborhood. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. Wanna be good so bad. But bad desire's all I've ever had. I wanna take a ride up in the sky, watch the aeroplanes just pass me by. I wanna see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show these people what it means to be alive. But I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I've ever had.